University of Victoria. Singing in the Brain, the impact of participation in a dementia choir on caregivers' affect and distress. By Cervantes, Roy, White, Ladun, Santana, Sheets, Smith, and McDonald. As the global prevalence of dementia increases, the disease burden of dementia is straining not only healthcare systems, but also family caring for their loved ones at home. Worldwide, over 50 million people are living with dementia, and there are nearly 10 million new cases every year. The present study assesses the impact of participation in a dementia choir on the caregiver's distress, positive and negative affect, and its relationship between those variables in family caregivers. What are the trajectories of change on caregivers' affect and distress as a function of their participation in the Voices in Motion choir, and what is the relationship between those variables? We divided in two objectives. We aim to explore the trajectories of change across months on the intervention for positive affect, negative affect, and caregiver distress. Also, we aim to examine the time-varying relationship between affect and caregiver distress.
The study was conducted during 3 12-week seasons of a choir program aimed at persons with dementia and their caregivers. Individuals were assessed 3 to 4 times during each season on their negative and positive affects and their levels of distress associated with duties of caregiving. All caregivers who completed at least one analysis were included in the study. The measure we used to quantify affect was the positive and negative affect scale, which assesses experience of positive and negative emotions over the previous week on a 5-point scale, with 1 being not at all and 5 being very much. The measure we used to quantify caregiver distress was the 12-item Zaret burden interview. The participants in the study included 32 caregivers for persons with dementia between the ages of 48 and 89. All were either the spouse or the child of the recipient.
For the analysis, we use a time-based model, linear mixed models to explore the trajectories of change in caregivers' affect and distress, and coupling analysis models to assess the relationship between all the variables. We model change in the 3 variables as a function of their time in the choir, within person and between person. The model helps us to explore the variance estimates and find the rates of change over time. Time was indexed as time in study, in months from baseline assessment. Time in study months was used as our predictor in the level 1 equation. Time will be account for these variances. We are aware that this is a first step, a baseline. It is the foundation to explore the variation, and it is more a descriptive of the average of change with a linear model. But later, in our second research objective, my colleague Sanjit will explain how we incorporate the model of coupling to explore the systematically correlation on the rates of change of caregiver distress and affect. We added and considered the caregiver distress as a predictor in our coupling model. For the level 2 equation, it was created a new variable with age. Age was centered at 75 years, which we consider a good value close to the mean. For the ICC, unconditional model for our variables showed more variance in the within person for affect and in the between person for caregiver distress, and this will be confirmed and discussed further with the coupling model. As you can see, the larger in the variation, it is informing us that more individual differences in people are seen. So, future studies can add predictors to explore those differences in variation. For this occasion, we did it with caregiver distress. In the trajectories of change models, we identified a slightly increase but not significant in caregiver distress, and also we found increases in both positive and negative affect, which highlights the challenging and complex nature of interventions in the setting of a dementia care. In the summary of results for time-varying effects in affect and distress, we found the slope for each of the 3 variables as follows. For caregiver distress, 0.05, for positive affect 0.35, and for negative affect 0.89. For affect, it is significant, but not for caregiver distress as mentioned prior.
For the research objective 2, actually we intended to find out the coupling change of affect and caregiver distress on occasion. We found that on occasion positive affect is decreasing with increase of caregiver distress, and these patterns of relationships is similar is between person and within person, but in that case for between persons this relationship is statistically significant, but for within persons this is not significant. On the other hand, negative effect is also increasing over the caregiver distress, and these patterns of relationships is similar for both between person and within person, but in that case this coupling change is statistically significant for between person but not significant in within person.
We identified significant increases in both positive and negative affect for caregivers over the course of the study. Initially, mean positive affect was higher than negative affect. Positive affect continued with a significant upward trend over the course of the study. However, the change in negative affect was greater, with a slope almost 3 times steeper than the change in positive affect. Given that this study covers up to 18 months of time in the choir, the change in negative affect is likely reflective of dementia as a degenerative neuropathology. This is a consistent finding in the literature. In regards to caregiver distress, self-reported caregiver burden did not significantly change over the course of the study. This is an interesting finding. When spending up to 18 months caring for a person with dementia, no perceived increase in caregiver burden is unusual, as one would expect to see an increase as the disease progressed for their care recipient. In the coupling models, on occasions when an individual's caregiver distress increased, their negative affect also increased. This demonstrates that an individual increase in caregiver burden was associated with an increase in that caregiver's negative affect. At a between-person level, so for the group as a whole, when caregiver distress increased, positive affect decreased. Further research into intergenerational community-based dementia choirs is certainly warranted, as well as specific investigation of the caregivers who are participating in these types of choirs. A potential area for examination is the connection between care recipient and caregiver affect. Dyadic analyses could showcase the impact of the choir on all of these participants' affect and if the two are related in any way. Limitations of this study include the lack of a control group, as isolating the impact of the choir from the normal trajectory of dementia would improve the quality of data collected. The small sample size was also a limitation. Although the intensive repeated measures design mitigates some of the impact of sample size, our statistical power was still constrained. Examining a larger number of choirs may be the best way to significantly increase sample size in similar study designs, given practical limitations on the number of choir participants.
We would like to sincerely thank the amazing contribution of our choral conductor, Erika Fairberg, as well as the equally amazing research participants. The Voices in Motion project was supported by grants from the Alzheimer's Society of Canada and the Pacific Alzheimer Research Foundation. Dr. MacDonald acknowledged the gracious support of the Royal Society of Canada College of New Scholars, Artists, and Scientists. Cervantes Matilde acknowledges the gracious support of the National Council for Science and Technology, CONACYT, Mexico.